Star Trek's original USS Defiant is just as important as Cisco's DS-9 starship. Star Trek Deep Space Nine's USS Defiant is the best-known starship by that name, but Star Trek's original USS Defiant impacted two Star Trek timelines. The Defiant class NX 74205 USS Defiant debuted in Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 3, a heavily armed warship designed, in part, by Captain Benjamin Sisko Avery Brooks. The USS Defiant was the prototype of a new starship class designed to fight the Borg. The S9 repurposed the Defiant as Sisko's main weapon against the Dominion. However, Star Trek, the original series, introduced the first USS Defiant, a Constitution-class deep space heavy cruiser similar to Captain James T. Kirk's William Shatner USS Enterprise. The USS Defiant NCC 1764 encountered the Tholians, with the crew going insane and killing each other. The Defiant was then trapped in a spatial interface and vanished in Star Trek, the original series' The Tholian Web. Over 30 years later, Star Trek Enterprise revealed what happened to the first USS Defiant. Star Trek's 23rd century USS Defiant was captured by the Mirror Universe's Terran Empire. Star Trek Enterprise Season 4's two-parter, In a Mirror, Darkly, takes place in the Mirror Universe, which is where the USS Defiant arrived. Further, the Defiant not only jumped to an alternate reality, but it traveled back in time about 100 years to the 22nd century, where it was captured by the Tholians. Commander Jonathan Archer Scott Bakula of the ISS Enterprise successfully commandeered the Defiant. Archer's plan was to use the 23rd century starship's advanced weaponry to make himself Terran Emperor. A century later, Star Trek Discovery revealed the Terran Empire ruled by Emperor Philippa Giorgio Michelle was more powerful than ever, having conquered most of their galactic rivals like the Klingons and Andorians. This was largely due to the Terrans reaping the technology of the USS Defiant, which gave the Terran fleet more fearsome and deadly weapons. Further, the Terrans learned about Star Trek's Prime Universe and the United Federation of Planets from the data in the Defiant's computers. The Terrans knew about the Federation long before Starfleet learned of the Mirror Universe's existence. While Star Trek hasn't defined what ultimately happened to the original USS Defiant in the Mirror Universe, the alternate reality continued the Defiant's legacy. Star Trek Deep Space Nine's Mirror Universe saga revealed that the Terrans were conquered by the Klingon and Cardassian alliance led by the Regent Worf Michael Dorn. The Terran Resistance built their own version of Captain Sisko's Defiant-class starship, the ISS Defiant. Sisko himself had to be brought to the Mirror Universe to make the overpowered Defiant systems function properly. Just as Captain Sisko's two versions of the USS Defiant were a linchpin of the Federation's victory in the Dominion War, the ISS Defiant was instrumental in the Terrans defeating the Alliance. The ISS Defiant helped force the Regent's surrender, which led to the restoration of the Terran Empire. Star Trek Deep Space Nine ensured that the Defiant had a legacy in both Star Trek's Prime Universe and the Mirror Universe. When fans hear USS Defiant, their minds often leap to the battle-hardened, compact warship that served as Captain Benjamin Sisko's Iron Fist during the Dominion War on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Sleek, aggressive, and fitted with pulse phasers, this Defiant embodied the Federation's reluctant descent into wartime pragmatism. But there is another ship by that name, forgotten by some, yet equally significant in the tapestry of Star Trek. The original USS Defiant NCC 1764, lost to madness in the eerie depths of interphasic space. The Defiant that appeared in Star Trek, the original series, in the classic episode The Tholian Web, may not have exchanged torpedoes with Jem'Hadar warships, but it deserves to be remembered as a symbol of the unknown, a vessel that pushed the boundaries of science, exploration, and horror in the final frontier. While Sisko's Defiant was born from war, the original Defiant vanished in the pursuit of peace and knowledge. That contrast, far from minimizing its importance, only deepens it. The ghost ship of the 23rd century, NCC 1764, was a Constitution-class starship, the same proud design as the USS Enterprise under Captain Kirk. But its fate was far darker. While investigating spatial anomalies in uncharted space, the Defiant encountered a rift between universes, a thin seam in reality where physics unraveled and space itself went mad. Her crew descended into violence and madness, driven by interphasic shifts that disoriented both mind and body. When the Enterprise arrived, all that remained was a silent, flickering hull and the phantoms of a shattered crew. This encounter with the unknown was Star Trek at its most haunting, a story not about conquest or triumph, but the terrible price of discovery. The Defiant's loss was a cautionary tale. Space was not just stars and warp signatures. It was also filled with things that defied understanding. This version of the ship wasn't just a casualty of exploration, it was a martyr. Echoes through time. The story of the original USS Defiant didn't end with its disappearance. It re-emerged decades later, albeit in twisted form. In Star Trek Enterprises, in A Mirror Darkly, we learned that the Defiant had slipped not only into another dimension but into another universe, the Savage Mirror Universe, where the Terran Empire ruled with an iron fist. There, the ship became a weapon of power, an artifact from a more advanced future, tipping the balance of power in a brutal universe. Its advanced technology, decades ahead of the Mirror Universe's norms, represented both a temptation and a danger. In this way, the original Defiant became a kind of ghost of destiny, one that haunted the multiverse and carried within its hull the seeds of galactic upheaval. Its role in that storyline was quietly brilliant. While Sisko's Defiant symbolized strength and resistance in the face of war, the original Defiant became a relic, a time-displaced sword of Damocles over an entire dimension. Its very presence changed everything long after its crew had perished. Sisko's Defiant, a necessary evolution. There's no doubt that Sisko's USS Defiant NX 74205 was an icon. It was the first Federation ship built specifically for combat, a response to the overwhelming threat posed by the Borg and later the Dominion. It shattered the idealistic image of Star Trek's utopia, showing us that sometimes, even peacekeepers need to carry a big stick. Sisko's Defiant earned its place in the spotlight, from its stealthy cloaking device to its pounding pulse phasers. But if the NX 74205 was born from a Federation forced to adapt, then the NCC 1764 was a product of the Federation's ideals at their purest. It ventured into the void not to conquer, but to chart the stars. Its demise underscored the dangers of those ideals and the necessity of humility in the face of the unknown. In that sense, the original Defiant is just as significant. It serves as a reminder of why Starfleet exists and the price it sometimes pays. Two sides of the same coin. The beauty of the USS Defiant, both versions, is that they represent two sides of the same Starfleet coin. One was lost in a fog of madness while seeking knowledge. The other emerged as a weapon in a war that threatened the galaxy's very soul. One vanished into myth and interphasic space. The other carved its name into battle logs and admirals' reports. But both are necessary to understand Star Trek. Without the haunting mystery of the original Defiant, the franchise would lose an essential thread of its Sky-Fi DNA, the understanding that space is vast, terrifying, and still full of secrets. Without Sisko's Defiant, we would miss the realism of a Federation forced to face war on an epic scale. Together, they form a legacy that stretches across centuries, timelines, and universes. So the next time you hear USS Defiant, don't just think of the ship that stood tall against the Dominion. Spare a thought for the ghost ship that came before, and the sacrifices made not in battle, but in the pursuit of knowledge. Let me know if you want this adapted into a script, a video essay, or stylized in a different tone. So the next time you hear USS Defiant, don't just think of the ship that stood tall against the Dominion. Spare a thought for the ghost ship that came before, and the sacrifices made not in battle, but in the pursuit of knowledge. Let me know if you want this adapted into a